fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. A monstrous provision, say YB Kitsiang. It's an affront to parliamentary democracy. And of course, all of us know that this is not the only provision that can be said as an affront to parliamentary democracy, because personally, just like some of my colleagues over here, I've gone through some of the probably harrowing experience, like going to the police station or a few weeks ago to Bukit Aman to give statement on what I said over the position and role of the monarchy in this country. The one that was a police report was lodged against was a report in Malaysia Kini, an article entitled "Rulers Flexing Their Muscle, Unhealthy," says expert. So I was actually saying a few things to enlighten the sort of role and function played by the rulers in parliamentary democracy, which I think is very much, into explaining what they should be doing in a democracy. But that was considered as sedition. And the same thing with what we are talking about here, section 124B of the Penal Code. And from what we have seen so far, the people who have been investigated or taken action under this provision are basically those guys who are working hard to make this parliamentary system really works. And perhaps we should look at what is actually meant by parliamentary democracy. Well, by the way, parliamentary democracy is one of the two major democracies in the world. The other one is, of course, presidential democracy, where the government is directly elected by the people, by the voters, by the electorate, like the one that we got in America, United States, or in Indonesia or the Philippines over in ASEAN. Whereas parliamentary democracy is basically a system of government whereby the government is appointed by the head of state. Of course, through certain rules, not purely by prerogative of the head of state. And the system whereby, which is also known as Westminster system, is a system whereby the head of state and the head of government are being held by two different people. Some of the parliamentary democracies are republic, like India and Singapore, and the rest are monarchies like the UK, Malaysia, or Australia. Now, what is crucial to me in parliamentary democracy is that government, despite being appointed, must have the majority of support in the House. So this is basically the basis for existence, for the continuance in office for the government in a parliamentary democracy, in Westminster democracy. So the government must answer to the House, and this is where you have got this question time and so on. So the Prime Minister needs to answer the MPs in Parliament. The government has to be made responsible, answerable to it, and this is where we have got all this. Apart from question time, we have got the Auditor General's report, and this is what actually people are doing. I mean, the MPs are doing in bringing issues and questioning or rather discussing matters pertaining to one MDB. But somehow this is the very people who are being investigated and probably would spend time in jail under this 124B. So apart from being monstrous, I find it weird, and I think it's quite this is unthinkable to have such a law in a democracy, because you got this rule of law and so on, and which means that the law must have a certain amount of justice in it, morality in it. And what we are seeing now is, I think, the law is getting more and more illogical. And this is, I think, the symptom that the government is terrified, is paranoid, and this is, I think, common in failed nation, where, you know, the government, instead of running the business of governing, is now very much into this business of threatening and making people terrified and forcing them to, or coerce them to accept whatever they do. Now, back to this parliamentary democracy thing. So it's very much the job of the MPs or the adons, even, you know, to make the government, the sitting government, responsible for what they are doing, or being punished for their omission on failures and so on. But this is again what is now become the question, you know, where, you know, MPs are in danger of losing their position, are being investigated by the police. And not only that, I mean, for the first time perhaps in history, we have got these conflicts between public institutions, between MACC and the police, and more recently Bank Negara. So this is very strange. So I think after more than 50 years of independence, now we are seeing that this system are crumbling. And I think we have got to do something about it, because I think before it's too late, then we better do something, because otherwise things will get worse. And I think the reason why we are in a position at the moment, or rather the reason why we are seeing this, because I think we have been rather complacent in the past. We did nothing to stop the rot. In a normal situation where, you know, you have got a good judiciary, you've got functioning mass media, or even a good monarchy, this system, or this malaise, this confusion would not have happened. And this is where you find, strangely enough, even former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir has now started talking about going to the street. I think he has lost somehow confidence and you know, a trust in the public institution, and this is something which I think is worrying, you know. And this is something that I mean all of us have got to do something about it. And I think waiting for the general elections perhaps is too far and too long ahead. So you got to do something this perceived for and whatnot, you see. So back to this question, but maybe something need to be done by our friends. We have got Saudara Johan here, we got YB Gobin, Dato' Ambiga, and YB Hanifa, probably to bring this question pertaining the legality of this provision under the Constitution, because I think it's a bit, I mean, this is perhaps the only among the rare provision in the Commonwealth talking about, you know, threat to parliamentary democracy in such a way, because basically what, if we understand correctly what is meant by parliamentary democracy, what they are doing, what discussed, I think basically it's the very thing that, you know, is the activities that people do in truly functioning parliamentary democracy. You see, and this is what the government is doing. I think the problem with the police and so on, but the way I look at it is, I think it's more of a kind of a strategy to put fear into people. I do not think that they will really charge these MPs in court later, because I just cannot see, because it's just difficult to, I don't know, but at least from my point of view, it's difficult to visualize how you're going to form the charge, the precedent and so on. Because eventually you've got to go through what is meant by parliamentary democracy, what can and what cannot be done, you know. Actually, when I was asked to come around here to talk about this, I was thinking that you're talking about threat to parliamentary democracy. Perhaps the most rather obvious example of rather activities that it can be said as against parliamentary democracy is when you ask for more names when there is already someone in the House who is holding the majority. That is probably the most obvious act of, you know, against parliamentary democracy. Look at that, huh? There's someone in the House with majority, and you refuse to appoint this person, and this is very much against democracy, because that is, an established rule, convention, and now it's become law in Malaysia that you must appoint that person. You have no choice. That's number one. Number two, when the Prime Minister is avoiding Parliament, that's another example of, of making this parliamentary democracy unworkable. Or maybe even the Speaker, refusing to entertain, to allow question, refusing to allow motion to be put up, and so on. Probably we should do something along that line. So I think that's how I look at it, and the rest I leave it to my distinguished friends on the panel here. Thank you.